Last week, Kamala Harris's interview with CNN's Dana Bash was a train wreck as she stumbled through incoherent responses, lied about her policy positions, and avoided tougher scrutiny due to Bash's unprofessionalism. This is what Shapiro asserted. I guess the main points of interview, and you haven't seen this interview as of yet, right, Connor?
No, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Now, are you familiar, though, with some of the policies that have been trickling out from the Harris campaign?
No, I think, ironically, people are concerned about a lack of a policy platform.
Aha, yes, that is one of the main criticisms. I know the main criticisms, according to Ben Shapiro, in regards to this interview, but also there's a lot of criticisms on the lack of policy proposals. I feel like they've been slowly trickling out. And I think we talked to Ryan last week about that, how part of me thinks, at this late in the game, it's probably good strategy to not go too hard. But Ben Shapiro, the main criticisms in this article were the softball questions, the short length of the interview, and there are accusations of lying about her policy positions. His critique was harsh, to say the least, in its rhetoric. I believe disingenuous in its framing. That's completely open to debate. Let me quote a little bit from this article. He says, "It's unbelievable that people take her seriously. She is just not bright enough to be president of the United States. She's stupid. The Democrats picked her, and I can tell how stupid she is because she answers questions the same way a college freshman would in their first intro to philosophy class. It is total nonsensical, gobbledygook, jargony trash." Does that sound like something Ben Shapiro might say?
Yep. Yeah, that rings true. That rings just about right. Look, I mean, I think. Yeah, that's a blunt way to put it, but I can only agree with it. I don't think it's You
think she's stupid? Objectively, Connor. Objectively, is she stupid?
And it might sound rough to say that, especially this day and age, because you're picking on a woman too, and that has nothing to do with it. I think there are a lot of really bright women out there that could definitely lead this country, but I just don't think she has the intellectual bandwidth to do it. And, our country is in such a pinch right now. There's just so much underlying political tension, and Americans have never been more divided since the Civil War, right? So we need somebody who can articulate themselves well, can articulate their policy platform, who has a clear outline of, what it's going to look like. We want concrete answers. And it seems like she's been dancing around a lot of those. And I just think that she's less than convincing to a lot of Americans out there.
That is definitely the, I guess I'll say narrative, for lack of a better word, that I've been reading online. Now, I don't totally agree with that assessment, but back to the initial question, you said intellectual bandwidth, but Connor, come on, is she stupid? Is she like Forrest Gump? I mean, she's not. I think it's a stretch to say she's stupid and she speaks in nonsensical gobbledygook jargony trash. I mean, her gaffes are fairly typical for public figures. Sometimes they result in word salad, which it's common for anyone in the spotlight. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure in this episode you're going to be guilty of it, Connor. Ben Shapiro has definitely had similar moments of verbal missteps. So it's Shapiro has specific criticism. It's I know that, and you talked about the vagueness in her policies and whatnot. You talked about her dancing around these issues. His criticisms of Harris, especially in the interview. Now, there's a question mark at the validity these questions have. At least I'm questioning them. Here, let me read a quote. She said, "When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. Now, Ben Shapiro says Bash could have jumped in and said the inflation rate when Trump left office was 1.4%. She could have said, your inflation rate today is 3%. The Federal Reserve shoots for 2%. You've had 40-year highs in inflation. All groceries are now 20 to 25% higher than they were when you took office. So how about that?" Now, I'm not an economist, And I think I made that clear in last episodes, but I do think this is an example of someone in the media who's fairly high profile of arguing in bad faith. Because even though, and you tell me what you think about this, Connor, but even though like I'm not an economist, I understand to a general basic like level, and maybe my understanding is off here, but that the pandemic did severely impact the economy, you know? And I think I don't think Shapiro's dumb. I think Ben Shapiro was smart. I think he knows that too, that the pandemic did severely impact the economy. Because to me, when I look at inflation, you know, and I'm sure Shapiro knows these fundamentals. Maybe these are so basic that they're stupid. But my understanding is when demand decreases, inflation falls, and when demand increases faster than the supply due to supply chain and labor shortages caused by the pandemic, inflation rises quickly. Now, so when I look at these inflation numbers, what stands out to me is that hyperinflation was avoided, and inflation it's come down, and it's on track to eventually stabilize. These are positive outcomes, I think, from a once in a generation pandemic. I think blaming Biden for rising inflation, you know, during the pandemic feels it's kind of unfair. It's almost like crediting Trump for lowering inflation in the same period. You know how before he left office, inflation was at 1.4%. But I mean, inflation falls when demand decreases. We were in the middle of a pandemic. So I think like both Biden and Trump could take some credit and discredit for the inflation of the economy, given, I mean, they both sent out massive stimulus packages. So I just don't see this argument on inflation, but maybe Connor, you can add something to that.
No, I don't think it's fair to pin inflation on Biden. I mean, look, a lot of this stuff is just outside of the control of the presidential administration, because the Federal Reserve is an independent entity. It doesn't answer to anybody. And I can't remember the statistic exactly, but it was somewhere around 40% of all U.S. dollars that are in circulation have been printed in like the last 3 years, like essentially since the pandemic, which is insane. I mean, when you just that's a really good way to cause inflation when you dump a massive amount of currency into the currency market like that. Then you inflate the currency, and it diminishes the spending power of the people. So I think that plays a huge role in why we're seeing such high prices at the grocery stores and whatnot. And Biden or the Biden administration doesn't have any say in whether or not that money is going to be printed or not.
This seems like disingenuous. It seems like politics at play here. Ben Shapiro, obviously a conservative. And a lot of the criticisms that Shapiro brings up in this interview, the softball questions, the length of the interview, the lies, these seem to be common trend. I was on Twitter like all weekend looking at the criticisms. They seem to echo a lot of what Ben Shapiro was saying. And the great news about this is that Trump gave a similar interview this week. He was on Hannity. He did an hour interview with Sean Hannity. So we can actually compare like these two interviews because that interview has its own criticisms, and we'll get to that. But we can actually compare these two interviews just on substance and across these metrics and really like see like if these criticisms hold water. And that's what I was interested in finding. Now, we talk about being a nonpartisan organization, and I want to make this clear right now. I'm partisan. Like I think I lean left. At least I think I do. My journey through politics and history, I think I can safely say I do lean left. Judging by your article, Connor, I do think it's safe to say you lean right, and I think you would identify that as well. So, but just to talk about my bias for a second, I have to say I tried really hard not to be politically biased on this one. I really did try to see if there was any merit, especially with the Kamala lying, on her policies. I really looked into that. And I looked into what she said in her interview. I looked into what Trump said in his interview. I looked into the questions that were asked, and I looked at the length of the time on each interview. And to me, I have come to the conclusion, and you might want to turn off the podcast right now if you don't want to hear this, but I have come to the conclusion that I think the criticisms lobbed by the right are a gross exaggeration. They're unfair. They are partisan. And I want to go through that real quick, just so I'm not just saying this in a vacuum. As I did really try. I want to make that clear. Now, let's just talk about something simple first. The interview length. That was like a huge deal to over the weekend to people that lean right, was the interview length, and they've been really hitting that home. They say 16 minutes. Ben Shapiro says 16 minutes. Now, I watched the full interview. It was what I see, and these are the objective facts. CNN released 27 minutes across 3 clips. Fox News, the Hannity interview with Trump, released 26 minutes across 7 clips. Now, you could say, oh, well, Waltz answered a question. Then there's Dana. Like, they're clearly timing her speaking time to get that 16 minutes, I think. But I'm pretty sure if you did the same with the Trump interview, when you take out Hannity's speaking time, when you take out the clips that they played, even when you take out, because there was a crowd in the Hannity interview, it was done with a large audience, and so they were applauding a lot. When you take all that out and you take out the ends cards of any YouTube video, I think you roughly get the same. I think you would roughly get the same. I would be shocked if Trump spoke more than 20 minutes. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll just say 20. So I don't think this is a big deal. And I think hammering the interview length is such a weird thing, because it has nothing to do, at least for me, it has nothing to do with whether or not Kamala would be a good president. The fact that she talked to Dana Bash for 16 minutes. And Trump talked to Sean Hannity for 20. Now, have you heard this criticism, Connor, on the interview length?
I haven't heard of it directly, but I can see how that would be a criticism from the right. I think these are pretty trivial details, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, you can cut out all the clips and all the credits, and okay, well, she only did 16 minutes of speaking time. Not that you can't, get across your policy platform in 16 minutes, because if you're, if you have a high verbal intelligence and you're able to articulate yourself well, then I think 16 minutes is more than enough to encapsulate your presidential platform. But I think where people are coming from is the fact that, she doesn't have the bandwidth to sit down with Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan. And I'm sure we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but RFK Jr., he's been making the rounds with all these guys, and he's doing these really long form podcasts where, a lot of it, I'm sure there's an outline, but a lot of it is just kind of on the fly, and it's quick improvisation, and, a lot of questions are posed where you don't have time, for your CNN staff to curate or help you shape an answer and so forth. And I think people look at that and they see authenticity. And so they want to see the same thing from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I definitely agree that it's trivial. I haven't seen anyone criticize Donald Trump's screen time of the Fox News thing. So I do think the intense criticism of Kamala for a CNN interview. I mean, these are legacy media companies. These are mainstream media channels. That these interviews are designed to be efficient. Now, you were talking about podcasting. I believe the ones that Trump sat down with were each about an hour each, and we are definitely talking about that later in the show. Right now, I'm just trying to compare the legacy media interviews, because I think it's unfair to compare Dana Bash's interview on CNN with Lex Friedman's interview, or Logan Paul's interview, or Theo Vaughn's interview, or because I think they're radically different formats. But you are right; she hasn't sat down for a long form interview, and there is something to be said about those formats. People like those formats, especially younger voters like those formats. It's a chance
younger
for
voters
a candidate.
Trust them.
Yeah, there's an authenticity. Now, when I looked at these interviews, because I watched like a bunch of these things, I honestly came to the conclusion that the CNN it was 16 minutes, but I thought it was way more efficient than the hour of. Sure, if you sit down with Trump for an hour on Lex Friedman, you're definitely getting the vibe of Trump. You're also kind of getting what he wants you to think. I mean, but there is like, it's like more of a vibe check. But when I'm looking for like specific information, I really do think legacy media does do a good job of relatively good job at just getting out information in an efficient, in a timely way, as opposed to podcasts where I do think they meander a lot. Like, I don't really care what Trump has to say about the UFC. I understand their audience does, and I understand it humanizes him and maybe authenticates him a little bit, but I don't give a crap. Like, I'm more interested in what he's like, what he wants to do as president, what he has done as president, and what he doesn't like that Biden has done as president or Harris has done as vice president. But yeah, we can, let's get off the time criticism, because I think it's so trivial. We'll talk about the podcasting in just a minute. I do want to go through the next. There's 3 criticisms. There's the time. There was the softball questions. Now, people get criticized a lot for softball questions, especially in mainstream legacy media. Now, I'm going to read you some of these questions, Connor, and you tell me I'm going to read you the questions that Dana asked. I'm going to read you the questions that Hannity asked. And you tell me your opinion on the whole softball question critique. Does this sound good?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do it. Okay, so Dana Bash. We'll start with Dana Bash, CNN. These are some of her questions. What would you do on day 1 if elected? What do you say to voters who want to go back, economically speaking, to more? And I've paraphrased some of these questions, but because I tried to just get the heart of them. And I paraphrased both Dana and Hannity, and I think I did a good job. What do you say to voters who want to go back to more affordable groceries and housing under Trump? Do you still want to ban fracking? Why did you change that position? Why did Biden-Harris wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions? Will you appoint a Republican to your cabinet? In 2020, you raised your hand about decriminalizing the border. Should people feel confident in your current stance? Do you have any regrets about defending Biden's ability to serve 4 more years? Now, that was from Dana. That was a serious, and I'm not saying these are the most hard-hitting questions, but let's say what Hannity said. Isn't energy, fracking, and oil the lifeblood of the world's economy? What's your reaction to Kamala Harris, our country's failed border czar? If 2016 was about the forgotten man and woman, what is 2024 about? What's your reaction to crime caused by unvetted Harris-Biden illegal immigrants? What does Kamala Harris's desire to raise various taxes mean for the economy? So when I look at this, I see, here's my opinion, many of Hannity's questions are framed around Kamala's policies. And they're often distorted in an exaggerated way. And then he just says, Trump, what's your reaction? So like Hannity frames, and then he goes, what do you think of that, Trump? But like, to me, I do look at these sets of questions, and I think Dana Bash did challenge Kamala Harris more than Hannity challenged Trump. Now, maybe Fox News is just such a low bar, but I think it's important to compare and contrast when these criticisms are lobbed. But you've heard these questions. What's your initial take?
I think they're just 2 sets of legacy media questions, and I think a lot of the answers are, predetermined. The interviews are highly curated and framed, and they have to take place within a certain framework. And nobody trusts legacy media anymore, unless you're older. If you're a baby boomer, those are the only people who are turning into MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. I really don't take a partisan stance on it. I'm very conservative, but I dislike Fox News as much as I dislike MSNBC or CNN. These are institutions that are just clasping onto the vestiges of a dying post-war world order, and that's a whole nother subject. But look, I think that both of these, you could say that the Hannity questions might be more politically charged and, more charged in a partisan way, kind of like a smoking gun. But I mean, they're just designed to be, fairly clean cut questions that candidates can answer within, how much time do they have? What is it, a 30-minute show, or, probably less when you factor in commercials and all that. So just like broader kind of like abstract questions like, hey, do you think this generally is good for the economy? Or,
Personally, I think it's obvious that Dana Bash's questions are better. One, a lot of those questions are just, hey, here's what people are saying Trump did good. These are things that Trump was successful on. Inflation, immigration. Here are things that are successful. Here are valid criticism against you. Okay, now respond essentially. But with Hannity, it's like, here are all the terrible, evil things about Kamala. Respond to that. Here are some great things about you. Respond to that. Now, you said I hate CNN just as much as I hate Fox News, and I'm sure when you put them all together, there's validity in that. But when I just judge just based solely on this criticism, I just think like it's a drastic difference, and I do think there's a growing trend that's happened in the last, as Kamala Harris would say, the era of the last like 10 years, is to conflate CNN with Fox News, where people are saying they're both equally biased. They both offer softball interviews. Like, one's really bad, so the other's bad. And I think the comparison is flawed, because I think there is one operating in worse faith than the other.
I think that media outlets like CNN and MSNBC are a little bit more sublime in their effort to I don't want to say mislead people isn't the right word, but to push their partisan points of view, and to capture their audiences into a liberal echo chamber, if you want to call it that. I think they're guilty of the same thing. I just think that Fox News is a little bit more overt in the way that they do it, and that's just a function of the way that place is run. I don't think it's, glaringly obvious when you look at CNN, but I've watched clips over the years, from both Fox and, CNN as well, and MSNBC. There are differences, but like I said, I think the differences between the liberal news medias like CNN are a little bit more sublime in the way that they kind of twist your arm, so to speak.
Now you say liberal echo chamber. When I was looking at clips regarding this interview on CNN, I saw, and I know that they've changed ownership recently, I saw a lot of critical commentators and CNN reporters of Kamala. And I even thought they were criticizing her in bad faith. I think they were, try to appear nonpartisan. They kind of stretch or exaggerate things. Like, for instance, like her, they keep saying she flip-flops. She's flip-flopping on fracking, right? She's a flip-flopper on fracking. She said she would ban it, and now she's saying she won't ban it. She says that she's against it, but then she says her values haven't changed. Now I think in the interview that I saw, she explains this position fairly well. She says, yes, in 2019, I was against fracking. Essentially, she became the Vice President of the United States. When she was part of that administration, she saw that it was possible to transition to a more green economy, create jobs, lower emissions without banning fracking. And so she's like, listen, my values haven't changed, but I've seen that you can do it without banning fracking. So I will not ban fracking. And I'm like, this seems like a reasonable position to me. And yet I'm on CNN, which you call a liberal echo chamber, and they're like, she's lying. She's gonna ban fracking. She's flip-flopping. And so, I don't know. I don't know if I'm convinced about this liberal echo chamber that is CNN.
I'd say the same thing happens on the conservative side of the spectrum. There have been plenty of Republicans who have spoke out against Donald Trump over the years.
I think with good reason, but
yeah.
And you know what? Like, I do want to talk about that because the third criticism, the last criticism, was the lying, the lies, right? And when I say like lies, I mean like easily Googleable lies. Like, these are like things that you say that you go, that's obviously not true. It took me like a minute to find that, as opposed to half truths, which I think is just the standard for politics. And I think politics is all about like spin. So I don't really hold people that are trying to spin, maximize the good, minimize the bad against politics, because that's what politics is. That's what politics always be. It's never going to change. But let's look at a couple of the things that Trump said. And these are the flat out lies that I heard. He does this in his podcast. And like, he really does repeat a lot of these talking points like throughout the podcast interviews. So they're all essentially the same, in my opinion. But this one claim, which I just think is so outrageous, and maybe I'm wrong here. Like I said, I'm not like a political scholar by any means. But when he says 21 million illegal immigrants crossed the border under Biden, and sometimes he changes that. I think the lowest number he says is 15. He'll go 15, and then in another interview he'll say 17. And Hannity has said 21. He said 21 million. And this isn't him misspeaking. This isn't him getting his numbers mixed up, because he makes these claims in every single interview. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to not only figure out that there are not 21 million illegal immigrants that are crossing the border under Biden, but by his own charts that he trots out, by his own, he's got a favorite that he showed Lex Friedman. The charts only go up to like 300K. He's like, look at this spike. And it's 300K. I don't understand how the math works to get to 21 million. I mean, if you look at statistics, it's significantly lower than that.
No, I think the number was 8.
It's not 21.
No.
And that 8 million is also like, and we can argue about the 8 million, because there are like certain things like conservatives cite gotaways. But then there's like, are we counting the same person coming by over and over and over again? So like I do think there's an argument to maybe made that number might be lower, but let's just say 8. 8 million is radically different than 21 million. And so by saying 20, like it's crazy. And then to say that the Democrats want open borders, that's also kind of crazy. I mean, Biden like expelled like millions and deported like another million under his term. Where's the open border coming from? Like what that's like, it's not a free for all down there. I don't understand. And it's like when he claims that immigration, like that let's just say that, yes, let's say that Biden is terrible on immigration. It's so bad. But when Trump says he's like, he got immigration lower than it's ever been before, right? And he trots out that chart and he points to April of 2020 and he says, this is when I left office. Look how low immigration was. You go, well, Trump, you dummy, you didn't leave office in April 2020. You left office in January of 2021. And December of 2020 and January of 2021, immigration was actually the highest. Illegal immigration crossings were the highest it's ever been on record. So when you point to that low number, which is obviously a reaction to the pandemic, but then you see like when he left, like and you compare that with history, it's the highest it's ever been. So I really think these are just, and he repeats it, and I think these are flat out lies. Now, I'm not saying there's not a surge like in illegal immigration with Biden. I mean, you could say that's due to global pandemic recovery. But Republicans, and especially Donald Trump, chalk it up to the Great Replacement theory, which is I do not think is a rational argument. I think it's highly conspiratorial, because non-citizens cannot vote in federal or state elections, except in some like municipalities, but they can't vote state and federal. So linking immigration to gaining Democratic votes, I just think, what are we talking about here? Like, I think these are blatant lies.
Well, I think they have programs in place for that, because I think they do want these people to vote eventually.
But they say they're voting now. They say it's happening now. Whereas when you say eventually, okay, when is that happening? What's the plan? I think it's conspiratorial. It's like, prove that that's happening. I'm not going to tell you it's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove that it's not happening. It's just like it's hard to prove that that Washington is not run by a cabal of Satanist pedophiles. But it doesn't mean it's happening. It's like the onus is on you to prove that. And I don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't point to a timeline or anything. I'm not part of the California legislator who's receiving a lot of these immigrants. I mean, really think you just have to look at a lot of the self-reporting that's going on. I mean, just in my neighborhood, the home that I grew up in here, there's a huge surge of immigrants just at the Walmart. They're just in droves, dozens of them, and mind you, they're sending their best, right? These are doctors and engineers who are now, twiddling their thumbs outside
They're not
the Walmart.
murderers. They're not murderers.
I don't think they're necessarily murderers.
Well, Trump says they're
but
emptying the prisons and the mental institutions and sending everyone here. He thinks it's an epidemic.
They're not educated.
Another
and
flat
that's
out
important.
lie. Yeah.
If we're admitting people into this country, I'm not against, limited and selected immigration. Canada had a good system for a long time where if you want to immigrate to that country, you can do that, but you have to fill a certain job title on a list of quotas that the government has set up. So let's say the Canadian government is short on civil engineers. If you're coming from another country and you have the credentials as a civil engineer, welcome to Canada. Congratulations. You come here, you're educated. Because you're educated, you're likely already on board with Western values and so forth, and you're going to integrate into society a lot better. But the number of people, even 8 million, it's a lot. It's
but you can argue really, there is more facts behind that statistic, but we don't have to get into the idea of immigration. I'm just talking about blatant lies.
Well, I think also if you want to. You have to put some sort of responsibility on the Biden administration because.
I'm not alleviating them of responsibility. I'm just calling out that blatant lie. Yeah, I got the graph right here.
Yeah, and
he claims he left office in April 2020.
Over U.S. history, and we've had the highest number of illegal immigrants under the Biden administration, and I think one of the best case studies that you can look at is. Texas versus the federal government, what was that, 8 or 9 months ago now, when, Texas under Governor Abbott decided that he was going to secure Texas's border. They started putting up razor wire because they just had these just unbelievable numbers of people coming across. These were not skilled immigrants. These were not doctors. These were not lawyers. These were not engineers. And they were just flooding Texas. And he said no, and the federal government under the Biden administration says, yes, you're going to tear down that razor wire, and you're going to open up a pathway for these people to come into the United States of America. And he was a brave man for putting his foot down and,
I'm
saying
not
no
arguing
to the federal
against,
government.
I'm not arguing against the surge, against the influx in illegal immigration. I'm saying that surge started under Trump, and Trump seems to not acknowledge it.
Sure, it might have started under Trump. I'm not sure what was going on during that time period. There's a lot of things to manage when you're the president, and you got to remember that states have a certain amount of autonomy as well. So depending on the legislator of that state and the border situation in each state, just like the case with Texas and the federal government shows that sometimes you have to. Those two entities battle each other, and one might prefer to open up the borders against the wishes of the others, and vice versa in some cases. So it's a complex issue, and I'm sure that I have faith that if he would have remained in office, it would have been a top priority for him to plug that hole that had emerged, at the very tail end of his presidency, because. His constituents and his voters who put him in office, that was a top priority for them.
Immigrate, yes. I'm not a question that's a whole other thing. I just when we're saying that Trump is lying, but also Kamala lies and they're equal lies. I don't think these are equal lies. I think these lies right here that he said on Hannity are blatantly untrue lies that are they're not just products of misspeaking. They're not getting the numbers just, I get the numbers a little, flustered. These are calculated lies that he goes on multiple shows and does. Whereas when people say that Kamala's lying, I looked at all the things that she said. Sure, you could say there are half-truths here. You could say, but when she says we cut child poverty by 50%, right? That's true. That happened. Now it raised again. And you could talk about that in a different, like, you could talk about like the extending the child tax credit and blocking that bill, what that had to do with that. But what I'm saying is the statement she said is true. They did add 800,000 manufacturing jobs. They did add 300,000 clean energy jobs. They did reduce immigration. She did not, from specific countries that she was charged with going to. There were 3 Central American countries that American businesses invested in as kind of like because what was it? It was a root cause mission. And since then, the rate of those of immigration from those countries has gone down. This is Honduras, Guatemala, and what's the other one? I'm forgetting, but they are like the 3 most like biggest chunks of Central American immigration, I guess, outside of Mexico. I'm not sure.
That's something I can get behind.
It's like these are like not lies. They're like I said, they might be half truths. But I'm not even putting in Trump's half truths. Like Trump has half truths too. Like when he says he has the biggest tax cut in history. Well, that's the biggest corporate tax cut in history. But he tries to sell it like it's a tax for working Americans. It's just not. It's a half truth. And I don't blame him for that. Like I said, politics is all about spin. That's what politics is, maneuvering and trying to get power so that you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, either for yourself or your constituents. So it's like, I'm comparing these things. We always say the lesser of 2 evils. They're just the same. I don't see them as just the same. I tried so hard to dig up dirt, like to catch her in a lie. It's not like in a primary. I don't think I'm Kamala's like target like voter. I don't think I'd vote for her in a primary. But when it comes to this general between these 2 choices, I just reject the lesser of 2 evil argument,
What I would say to that is, I mean, I guess this could be like my closing statement on this, but, I'm not going to sit here and try to defend Fox News or, stuff that Trump has just gotten flat out wrong because, he does say some stupid stuff sometimes. And just, let it be on the record. I prefer a RFK Jr. presidency over a Trump presidency, even though I'm a conservative. They always try to pitch you as a Trump supporter if you're a conservative.
You're doing a great job at playing devil's advocate, though, Connor. I really appreciate that and enjoy that. The show needs that. Or else it's just me, like, espouting my liberal beliefs.
Right. Yeah, diversity of thought, that's what we're about here. But for my closing statement on this, I'd say that I don't think that the liberal institution can lie because, what we have going on in this country, well, it's not going on. It's already been completed, but institution capture, whether we're talking about our universities, our judiciaries, our legislators, our governance structures, and so forth. They've been completely captured by not the old American left of old, not the party of John F. Kennedy, not the party of Harry S. Truman and Franklin Roosevelt. That's the real American left. And I probably would have voted Democrat back then. I probably would have voted for Franklin Roosevelt. But we've been infiltrated by this foreign ideology, a different kind of left that is completely foreign to the American soul. It's this stuff. It's Marxism, it's socialism. It's some people call communism. It's all the same. It's subversive, and it's not tolerant. There's no room for compromise with this ideology. And so when you control the news media, when you control the universities and the judiciaries and so forth, really you have a monopoly on information. And so essentially we don't have political pluralism. We don't have a pluralism of thought when it comes to ideology. So, this is something that RFK Jr. was talking about just a couple of days ago when I was listening to him. And he was saying how Antony Blinken came to the CIA when the Hunter Biden story leaked, X amount of years ago or something. And it was a huge problem for the liberal establishment. And so Antony Blinken went to the director of the CIA and he said, I need help with this. People can't know about this. people don't need to be hearing about this. It's just going to cause us a lot of trouble. It's an inconvenient truth is what it is. And so they said, no problem. That's what we do here at Intelligence. And, not too long after that, every single major media outlet is trumpeting it as a hoax. And so this is what I'm talking about, is that you'll never catch a liberal in a lie. You'll never catch the left or the uniparty in a lie. It's not possible.